A very good afternoon to all of you. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Eternal University, and President Kalgidhar Trust, Dr. Devinder Singh, our esteemed invited speaker, Ms. Zitin Munshi, respected Dr. N.P. Singh, Dean Research, Eternal University, and Chairman, Akal Innovation and Entrepreneurship Cell, Sarbadda Bhala, respected Deans, Directors of prominent bodies, and faculty members from various constituent colleges of Eternal University, dignitaries and volunteers from Kalgidhar Trust and Akal Academy, and dear students. I am Simranjit Kaur, PhD Inspire Fellow from the Department of Zoology. It is my pleasure to welcome you all for this exclusive expert talk on entrepreneurship, organized by Akal Innovation and Entrepreneurship Cell, Sarbadda Bhala. I extend my warm welcome to our invited speaker, Ms. Zitin Munshi, who have joined us via online mode all the way from US. Ma'am, we are extremely thankful to you for accepting our invitation and sparing time from your busy schedule. To commence the opening of this prestigious talk, I would like to invite Dr. N.P. Singh, Dean Research, Eternal University, and Chairman, Akal Innovation and Entrepreneurship Cell, Sarbadda Bhala, to please join us for the welcome address.
Thank you, beta, and Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. It's so heartening to see the audience, the auditorium full with a lot of enthusiastic, listeners. And I take this opportunity to welcome Zitin. Thank you very much for taking this task of trying to empower our young women, girls, on a topic which is very, very important in today's era of sustainability and linking it with entrepreneurship. For last 1 year since the time we've joined, and I think we've taken this initiative, understanding the importance of achieving sustainable goals, especially for the university, and we have now taken this path of trying to inculcate in our daily activities the importance of sustainability goal. The topic is extremely important for young students who are going to be entrepreneurs in their future lives. Himachal Pradesh is one of the states which is second in implementing of their SDG goals. But unfortunately, when we travel from Chandigarh to this place, we see the disaster happening in terms of, mountains being almost disastrously destroyed and making roads for us. Mankind is a very mean mankind. I have just yesterday put in a posters, if you have seen, about monkey menace. Actually, it should have been put by them on human menace. We are the ones who have actually come to their place. But one thing is very clear, that we need to now inculcate this habit of SDGs in our lives. Example of every one of you visiting Erie is a very normal phenomena. But unfortunately, after you come back, you tear that lace packet and eat those very, very tasty chips. And the packet goes to either the dustbin or goes elsewhere. Have you ever bothered as to find out as to what happens to that plastic wrapper which you've had just easily thrown? It all goes to the 4th floor, where we have one of the best solid waste management plant where they are segregated. But unfortunately, after that, you cannot, throw it, we cannot degrade it into a meaningless substance. It goes to the market. If you happen to travel from Delhi to Chandigarh in a Shatabdi, you can well see the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan from our Honorable Prime Minister's evidence. Both sides are littered with plastics. I am reminded of a very small example in a district, in a small hamlet of Jalori in Mandi district. I don't know whether you've heard about that project, Jalori. A young girl participated in an environmental day, but unfortunately, after that day was celebrated, there was almost a trash of the dustbins, full of plastics. she started this campaign of a green, eco-friendly environment, and she started this Operation Jaluri. So I would feel that each one of you should, in your innovative mind, think about how we can sustain, how we can implement this STG. Otherwise, like Paris or like Italy, where on one day you have a temperature of 41 degrees centigrade, and the next day there are flash floods. And these are going to be very, very common occurrences. The wrath is on European countries, the wrath is on California or west coast of US, but this wrath is going to be in India. And today also, if you happen to read, there's a landslide in Mandi killing 15 guys. So unfortunately, these things are to be happening, and I'm so happy and that Ravinder has taken this initiative of inviting a very, very enthusiastic young entrepreneur who has taken up this task of a green entrepreneurship or a sustainable entrepreneurship. We are well versed about her credentials, and all of us have gone through the LinkedIn, which she's so fond of, and she's posted this program also yesterday in her LinkedIn handle. And I'm very sure next 1.5 hours going to be very, very educative and empowering to each one of us to take back this message of inculcating sustainable goals in our lives. With this, I'll again thank Ravinder, the team, Entrepreneurship Innovation Cell, of course, our revered Vice Chancellor Ji, Dr. Davinder Singh, the whole team, who has, in fact, special thanks to Dr. Chauhan for declaring today's off as an on day, so that each one of us could physically be here to listen to Nitin. So with this, I'll again thank our Secretary, Kamal, for giving me a chance to be here. And over to you, Kamal, and thank you, Bete.
Thank you, sir, for boosting the morale of the gathering with your warm and welcoming words. With this, I take this opportunity to formally introduce the woman of our eminent invited speaker, Ms. Zitin Munshi, currently Chief Editor and Podcaster at Sustainability Simplified. She holds a master degree in development economics from University of London. She comes with a work experience of more than 9 years in the field of sustainable development. She has formerly worked in the field of sustainable development with organizations such as Unilever, the United Nations Development Programme, State Government of India, TechnoServe in Botswana, Africa. Being a passionate advocate of sustainable development goals, she has taken a step further by starting her own venture, the Nextmile Co. This venture focuses on growing business sustainably and has empowered more than 300 entrepreneurs and touched about 4,000 lives till date. Ma'am, it is an honor to have you here among us. I invite you to please commence your talk entitled Sustainability and Entrepreneurship.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay, thank you so much for this kind introduction. Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. It's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, that wow. Okay, that's a lot of people there. Thank you so much for joining in. This is very very heartening at 5:45 in the morning. This is amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And whenever we are talking, this is going to be a very, very interactive session. Let's not make it a I'm talking, you're listening kind of thing, because sustainability as a topic is it's very fluid, it's very flexible, it's very highly, related to interpretation. So thank you for having me here, and thank you, Ravinder. It's a wonderful initiative that you started. So it's wonderful to be here. Please do not call me ma'am, as sir mentioned. I am a young entrepreneur. I don't want to be called ma'am, etc. So you can just keep it at Zitin. There will be a lot of questions that I'll be posing. There will be a lot of interaction, as I mentioned. So I believe there are mics placed at different parts of the auditorium. Please feel free to jump in, give in your inputs. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can also raise your hands. But we will have a Q&A at the end of the session. So if it's okay, can I present my screen? Then you can see the presentation. Is that fine? Can we have a thumbs up or something? Okay. Okay, awesome. Great. So I'm going to just switch off my video to save bandwidth and put in the screen. Please let me know if you can see the screen. Yeah, is it visible? Someone will have to like tell me
Yes,
or
ma'am,
in
it's
audio mode.
visible.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Thank you so much, and you can drop the ma'am. Okay, thank you so much. We're here together to talk about the SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals and or sustainability and entrepreneurship, something that's been a part of my life since a few years now, and I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you so much. So before we begin, as I mentioned, some very key things. Interaction will be a very important part of this session today. Um, I mean, you don't need to keep your microphone muted. It's more of like when I do sessions, it's people joining in from different locations. So I would like you to speak up whenever possible into the mic. And there will be a Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have any questions pending, you can always kind of come in there. Today we're going to talk about some very basic things, but also some very interesting things. So one, of course, is the idea of sustainability, what really it is, and why is it important. So we'll talk a little briefly about the SDGs as well. So sections 1, 2, 3 will be slightly brief. When we go into sustainable entrepreneurship, it will be a little more detailed, where we will talk about largely the two types of enterprises. Um, and certain examples to show you what can happen. I'll also let you know, since Sir raised the topic of chips packets, I'll also let you know what can be done with those chips packets. I don't have a separate slide on it because I didn't know Sir will raise that topic, but we'll talk about it in the Q&A session. There's a friend of mine who's working on something interesting that you can do with those chips packets. So that's on section 4. In section 5, I'll tell you a little bit about a campaign that we are running where you can also participate. And finally, we'll end with a Q&A. Yeah. So that's about me. You already know about me. It was very humbling to get such a long introduction. So this is about me. I've spent a little over 9 years in the space of sustainable business development, sustainability, and the SDGs since the time they were formulated in 2015. And I've got the opportunity to work with a couple of brands and companies, both in India and in Africa, which gives me a slightly nuanced understanding of the developing market. Currently, I'm in the North American region. I'm in Canada right now, trying to understand if there are developed market models that can be used for sustainability and business, and marrying the two. As you know, I run a podcast as well, where every month I get to entrepreneurs to talk about their business, and largely a purposeful business, so that they can spread their story and inspire many others to kind of start their enterprise or contribute to those enterprises which are being covered. As you know, I'm the founder of Nextmile Co, which is essentially a consulting firm where we try to consult different businesses on how they can improve their efficiency, keeping the 3 P's of sustainability at the foundation. So people, planet, and performance. These three are the key foundation areas of sustainability. So we try and help businesses to strengthen these areas through our consulting practice. And as you know, I have a master's degree in development economics from the University of London. Let's kind of jump in and look at what really is sustainability. So anyone wants to take a chance and tell me what really sustainability is about? I spoke about the 3 P's for sure. That is huge part of sustainability. But what is the one word that comes to your mind when we say sustainability? Anyone would like to, unmute the mic or take the mic and have a go at this? Any word that comes to you when I say sustainability? Any one word? Anyone would like to take a chance? I'm sorry, I can't see you guys because the screen is like it's on full screen right now. So it would be nice if anyone would like to take a chance and just let me know what is the word that comes to you. Anyone in the faculty could also like attempt.
So it's doing a business or a work which also looks after the future. You need to keep something
Right,
for the future as well, and not
right,
be mean
absolutely.
enough to do your work and then throw the.
100%, 100%. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Anyone else? Anything that
Am
comes
I?
to you? Yes, you are audible.
I think green is a word, as you are saying
Yeah,
green sustainability. So green, yeah, feasible, yeah,
yeah.
viable. When I hear sustainability, these three
Thank you so
words
much.
come. Yeah.
I didn't get your name.
My name is Bhuvi.
Okay, thanks, Bhuvi. Yeah, thanks. Anyone else would like to take a chance? Any word that comes to you, anything that strikes you?
Hello,
Hi.
ma'am. Sustainability means sparing natural resources.
Sorry, your voice is breaking. Can you repeat that?
Sparing natural resources for the future generations to come.
Yes, yes, that's right. I didn't get your name.
Ma'am, Amber Shirasto.
Okay, thanks, Amber. Thank you. Also, whenever I'm asking a question and you're responding, if you can start with your name, just it's just better.
Yeah.
It helps me
Hello,
build a better
I'm
connect.
Dr.
So yes,
Rana.
hello,
Hello.
hello, doctor. Hello.
Sustainability means that when we are keeping that natural resources as well as energy for our future
Yes,
generations. In other words, we can say that we are concerned for the future of our
right,
generation. Thank you.
right. Thank you so much, doctor. Thank you. Great. So those are some really great responses. I'm sorry, anyone else before we proceed? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Okay, okay. So let's just kind of break this down a little bit. Some keywords that came up in this kind of interaction were green, future, not being selfish, keeping something for later as well, something that's viable, right? So something that's feasible in the long run. So those are absolutely right keywords. Definitely, these are some of the very major sort of tenets of sustainability as a word. But if you look at sustainability very closely as a word, sustainability is a mix of sustain and ability, right? So, very simply put, the ability to sustain, right? So, the ability to sustain anything in the long run, it could be through your personal actions, as Sir mentioned. It could be through your business, right? So, I help businesses to help others so that they can, sustain themselves, but also empower others in the process. It could be through advocacy, right? Somebody is going out and talking about sustainability, etc. I do that sometimes on my socials, as Sir mentioned. Um, so it's a mix of that. It's essentially the ability to sustain something for the long run. But when you look at the word sustainability, it actually was practiced in the green or the environmental side of things. So this green circle that you can see over here, uh, sustainability was originally practiced from a green lens. So it was practiced from a point of view of environment means sustainability, right? So let's go back a little bit and look at history. We see the Harappan civilization. A lot of you might have studied that in history class in school or in college. Or we talk about even certain Egyptian civilizations. If you look at their structures, they are very either right angled in terms of the lanes, or if you look at the townships from a let's say a drone shot or an aerial shot of those townships, you will see that they're very right angled, or they're very like specifically placed in areas where they try to basically imbibe elements of nature. So the original idea really came up in sustainability, understanding nature and yet coexisting with nature, and trying to see how we can contribute to nature while also living our lives, right? So that's how it really started. It was the Germans who actually first gave the idea of, gave a word to sustainability, not this sustainability as a word. It was the German word. I don't recall the exact word, and it was very complicated to pronounce as well in German. But essentially, they gave a term to as to coexisting with nature is what sustainability really means. Now, in modern times, when we look at sustainability, it has changed. The definition of sustainability has changed. It has gone beyond green, just green. So it's not just green, it's not just environment. It's actually social and economic as well. So when I spoke about the 3 P's of sustainability, which is people, planet, and performance, um, we see that people is the social aspect. I'll get into the details in just about a minute. Then there's planet, which is environmental, and finally there's performance, which is economic in nature, right? So when we look at social or the people aspect, we say there can be please be mindful that these points which are written under each of these sections are indicative. Okay, there are lots more metrics that come into play when we talk about social, environmental, or economic. It's just to give you a primer understanding, kind of a 101 understanding, that I've mentioned only a few pointers. So now when we look at social, there are a couple of ways in which an organization or a community can actually be more socially sustainable. Okay, that could mean diversity. Diversity and inclusion is a very big topic coming up in the business world, but also in communities, right? We want to try and understand other people, other cultures, bring them together, right? So that there are fresh ideas, new ideas which are coming into play, which are culturally contextual, but also there's a lot more understanding with other, religions, caste, classes, etc. There are so many layers, right, in a diverse country like India. Then there are aspects of human rights, right? So child rights, rights of different types of communities, minority rights, etc. How do we get those to come together and contribute for something that's more meaningful? The next is community outreach. This is more to do with either institutions and or businesses or people who are engaging in advocacy, right? When we look at businesses or maybe let's say all the community activities that are being done by Eternal University, right? In the vicinity of the community, you're trying to make an impact in an area where you are operating and or in an area where you have interest. So let's say I am a Marico, right? Marico is the company which manufactures Parachute coconut oil. I'm sure Parachute, you might have heard of the brand, right? They have operations across India, right? But their headquarters are in Bombay, right? What do you want to do to impact a community that maybe is sitting in Himachal, for example, right? There is an active market for the coconut oil that they have. Maybe in the vicinity of the manufacturing area or the area where they market their coconut oil, they might want to do an activity that helps the community there. Maybe their topic of contribution is education, for example. Or if you want to link it more to the kind of brand or the product, they might be procuring coconuts from the south, right? So they can look at South India, certain communities in South India where they are procuring the coconuts, right, for actually processing and creating the coconut oil, right? So how do they do community outreach over there? When it comes to social welfare, it's a lot related to community outreach, but it's also related to activities that are also done in a philanthropic way. The previous example that I told you about community outreach was very related to either the brand or the business or the operations of the particular organization. Social welfare is beyond that. It is philanthropy, right? It is charity, basically. A lot of work that you do may or may not directly contribute to your brand, but it will build your company or your organization or empower that NGO particularly, which is engaging into social welfare activities. A great example is the Tatas, right? They've been around for several years, right? Several decades, in fact. So they also engage in a lot of community outreach, yes, but also social welfare, right? Like for example, I was a Tata scholar when I went for my studies, to London. 120 people across India get that scholarship, and they selected me as one of the students. But that is social welfare because it's not related to any of the products that they sell, right? It's not related to anything that they do in their business, right? It goes a little bit beyond. So essentially, social is one big one big pillar that comes into sustainability as well. It's also one of surprisingly, it's also one of the pillars that is actually not considered so much. So if you go back to our conversation, a lot of green environment was popping up, but nobody talked about social, right? Because it's not something that immediately strikes us, right? And maybe we'll talk about a little bit about that in the Q&A section, why social doesn't come into the picture. Let's move to environmental. Environmental is very simple. It's on essentially on resource efficiency, biodiversity, life cycle management, and emission reduction. These are some of the indicative, as I mentioned, indicative pointers. Very simply put, what are those natural resources, as all of you mentioned, or green resources, which we can efficiently use so that they can be preserved, not only for us to see, but also for future generations to really enjoy, right? Resource efficiency is that. Biodiversity is, how diverse is the nature around in your community. If you walk around your campus, you might see some birds, you might see some types of trees, plants, which are endemic or which are local to your community. They may or may not grow in every part of India, right? Because the weather condition, the soil conditions are different in different parts of, the world. So how diverse is that, right? And how much we can do to conserve the biodiversity, around, right? And also looking at endangered species, right? Those which are on the IUCN Red List. IUCN is essentially the International Union for Conservation of Nature. They basically release, every now and then they release a list of endangered species of birds, of insects, etc., of different flora, fauna, which must be preserved across the world. So a lot of companies and organizations also refer to the IUCN Red List to kind of look at what can be done for biodiversity. When we come to life cycle management, it's essentially the life cycle or the lifespan of a particular product. Okay, let's pick up the chips packet, since Sir mentioned that example. A chips packet will go through a process, right? First, the potato will come from the potato farm, right? They will be procured from the farmer. The potato will go into the processing unit. It will be cut into thin pieces. It will be fried, etc. Right? And then it will be filled into the packet, which effectively has 50% air and 50% chips. But and then that packet is transported right to the distributor, and the distributor then sends it to either the retailer or it directly ends up into your supermarkets, etc., where you pick it up, or your mom and pop stores, the smaller stores which you find in local communities. It'll reach there, and then you'll consume it, and then it'll probably end up to the landfill. And or there is another alternative. We'll talk about that later in the Q&A. Right. So this is the entire journey that a particular product might follow. We'll talk a little bit more about the life cycle management approach and the value chain in just in a few slides. And then there's emissions reduction, a very common factor which is used in the environmental space, which is talking about basically greenhouse gases. So recently I released a video on my socials about GHGs, or greenhouse gases. A lot of people talk, GHGs ye hai, GHGs wo hai, but kya hai GHGs? Do you know how many gases comprise of the GHGs? What are the type? Everybody talks about, carbon dioxide. But then if you look at, GHGs, you break it down, it's actually a lot more, right? You have methane, which by the way is more polluting than carbon dioxide. It's just that in terms of its emissions, it's much lower. Carbon dioxide is much higher because methane is not released from driving vehicles, etc. Right? Methane is primarily released from agricultural, rather live animal husbandry activities, which is far lower than the amount of emissions that are released in your usual driving, etc., etc. So so while methane has a higher potential to be more damaging, because the quantity is less, that's why people don't directly associate methane with GHG, or even the fluorinated gases, right? Or nitrous oxide, which is released through industrial practices, right? So there's a mix which goes into that entire emissions process. Again, these are only the greenhouse gases that I mentioned. There are several other harmful gases which are released, and it depends really from industrial process to process, and or whatever activities we engage in our daily lives. So this really comprises of the environmental piece. Now let's get to the economic side of things. In the economics, what we see is that there are lots of things that really govern the social and the environmental, which actually has a spillover on the economic side. So if we are, let's say, let's look at the connections, right? If we are doing community outreach, right, it's going to impact a social or social welfare. It's going to impact the social makeup of the entire community where you are doing your activity. Maybe that activity is environmental, a particular activity. Maybe you're looking at a particular community and preserving, let's say, those coconut trees in Kerala, for example, right, as part of your community outreach. But that is also going to help the people who work on those coconut farms, right, or plantations, right? Because you are procuring something that is a natural resource, but at the same time, you're empowering the people over there. So that essentially is local economic performance. You are improving the local economy of that particular community, right? When we talk about capital efficiency and governance, it's specifically about businesses, right? So when we look at businesses or any kind of institutions, right, there is a governance process even at the university here, right? There will be a dean, there will be a principal, there will be a vice principal, perhaps there will be a leadership team that's looking after the entire governance mechanism of the university, right, to make sure that okay, sab kuch order mein hai, everything is going fine, and these are the meetings that they might have every quarter to discuss certain challenges, solutions, maybe look at new ideas, maybe look at new topics to be supported, which is maybe why Ravinder reached out to me. So those kind of governance processes are usually there at any kind of institution and or a business. Right now, how does that help the economy? It helps the economy because when those activities are conducted at a leadership level, they're able to see the macro picture, saying that, oh, this is something that we need to talk about to our students, or maybe this is something that we need to talk to our CEO about, because our employees are facing XYZ challenge, in the company. Capital efficiency is a very direct relation to the economy part of it, and that's because capital efficiency talks about human capital, it talks about financial capital. How do you basically look at deploying the money in the most efficient manner so that there's maximum output, with the minimum financial input that is possible at their end, so that the money is managed better. So these are the three basic areas that come in, when we talk about sustainability. I want to pause here and ask if there are any quick questions that we might want to take, since I spoke a lot and there was a lot on this slide. Anything specific that's coming to anyone's mind? Anyone might want to ask anything? Okay, I'll take that as a no. And we can then proceed to a quick quiz. Anyone wants to answer this question? What are the 3 Ps of sustainability? I spoke about them a little bit. Sorry, is somebody saying something?
Out
Hi.
of these three, social, economic, and environmental factor, which one you think the more responsible for this environmental degradation, and for which we are now taking so much initiative for sustainability?
So, sorry, I didn't get your name.
In a relative sense, social, economic, and environmental factors, which one is more important? We should pay more attention.
I got your, yeah. So I got your question. Could I get your name?
I'm S.C. Ghosh. I'm working here as a director in this university.
Okay. Hello, sir. So it's a nice question that you've asked. There's a reason why the circles on this slide are exactly equal. So if you put each of these circles on top of each other, they will blend into each other. And the answer to your question is that all of them are actually important. But if you're talking about environmental degradation specifically, definitely the environmental factor will take precedence over here. But when you talk about sustainability as a holistic concept, um, these 3 factors actually are equal. And that's why I've also, as I mentioned, drawn them as equal circles on this slide. But yes, if you talk about natural degradation, etc., definitely the environmental factor takes precedence. But when we talk about environmental factors as well, if you look at the example, going back to Sir's example of the chips, etc., right? It's both a social thing but also an environmental thing and an economic thing. I'll explain why. So let's take that example. If we take that example, so we see that one is obviously environmental damage, right? It is happening because you're throwing that chip packet, around the mountains, and then that piles up as garbage. Because when somebody throws something, people are like, "Oh, this must be a garbage pile, so let me just pile on," right? So that's effectively creating a mini landfill in an area which is an eco-sensitive zone, let's say like Sirmaur, right? But it is also a social evil, right? Because it's coming from a human and its social mind, right? That, oh, this is socially acceptable as making it a mini landfill. Let me add to this, right? So it becomes a social problem as well, right? And then it's economic because it is hampering the economic or local economic performance of the region. What could contribute, let's say, to tourism for somebody coming from outside to visit Sirmaur, for example, that will kind of go down, right? Because they will keep seeing piles of garbage. I recently went to Beed in Himachal. I'm sure a lot of you might have heard of Beed. Um, Beed is a great place to do paragliding, etc., etc., and lots of activities around. But when I went there, there was something that took me, by surprise, which is the amount of mini landfills that are actually there across the entire road. Beed, the village itself, effectively is just one road, and on the left and the right side, and even near the paragliding landing site, which is one of the biggest tourist, areas. Probably in India for paragliding. Um, there were many landfills like these, people just throwing garbage, and a lot of those were actually chip packets, bread packets, ice cream, packets, etc. And it was very disheartening to see that because these are eco-sensitive zones, right? So I also mentioned the example of Mandi. I actually have a very close relation with Mandi because for 20 or 22 years of my life, I have basically done an up down from Bombay to Mandi. My grandparents were based there, my maternal grandparents. So I do understand how eco-sensitive Himachal as a state is, but actually, if you break down any activity, usually it from the environmental side, it will have an environmental lens, but it may also spill into social and economic. So does that help to answer your question, sir? Uh, Sorry, I'm not able to hear. Is that helpful to answer your question?
Hi, Zitin.
Hey, hi.
I hope you don't have problems since you mentioned to run first name basis.
Oh, yeah, yeah, please, please. I didn't get your name.
My name is Shatakshi Kohli. I am a student at Eternal
Hi.
University.
Hi, hi.
I have a question here. So, as you
Sure.
mentioned, that sustainability started with green, considering the
Yes.
environment. So, these days,
Yes.
climate change is the major issue that we are facing. So, the question I
Yeah.
have is, considering all these three aspects, the role play
Yeah.
of it, I have question based on it. So, if we talk
Yeah.
about climate change and
Yeah.
considering the environmental thing, so we are high
Yeah.
on these days climate change and the impact of it and all of the
Yeah.
other things. And at the same time, all of these countries are now facing the problem of inflation, which takes into
Mm-hmm.
account the economic point of view, right? So
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
New Zealand also faced inflation in previous day, that was the largest in
Yeah.
the all the 10 decades of the New Zealand, and US is also facing inflation.
Mm.
And since these are the developed countries which are facing inflation, so now
Yeah.
the thing is that, and taking into the social point of view of developed and developing country, so India is a developing country and there is a lot of diversity in that. So now, as as winters are approaching, then we go shift back again to the point of heating. So when it comes to
Mm.
heating, India uses coal. So
Mm.
the agenda which IPCC set, which they set, was to reduce the carbon emissions. So now these
Yeah.
developed countries had turned back on it, and they are going again to coal as a reserve for that all that heating supplies in their rooms, which they are going to probably use in upcoming winters. So my question is, the growth we have sustained so far, the mission we have
Mm.
accomplished so far of keeping those climate change and the that global warming at a bay, we are able to keep it at a bay. But once we hit, or once the winters hit us, so it's going to be really impossible for us to sustain those goals. So I would like to get your point of view on that, taking all these three into role play, and tell us how we could sustain those things which we have so far achieved, taking into role play of all these three dimensions you talked about.
Right. So your question, just so that I'm clear, uh, because you raised a couple of points in your question. Your question is around how do we take in social, economic, and environmental aspects to consider energy efficiency when it comes to heating during winters. Is that summarizing your question well?
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Right. So when we look at the aspect of, yes, you are absolutely right in your observation that coal is being used very heavily. And I come from Kashmir where we basically use coal all the time. It's sad, but it's true. We have something called as kangri or कांगर हम कश्मीरी में कांगर बोलते हैं उसको तो उसमें बहुत कुछ ये कोल एक्सेट्रा जाता है एंड इट्स एसेंशियली यूज्ड अंडर आवर ट्रेडिशनल फेरन it's a Kashmiri loose Kashmiri dress where you can kind of hold that thing and the heat passes on from the burning coal. Yes, those are traditional practices, but I think in the modern times there are efforts being made to shift to more cleaner forms of energy, and that would contribute to SDG 7, which is on renewable and clean energy. Um, when we look at the social, environmental, and economic side of energy, particularly, the economics is the place, is the place where we get stuck, and that has been the biggest problem with renewable energy shifts. Uh, and I think that's a problem with any shift, right? It's the पैसा बोलता है, as they say, right? So when we talk about shifting to solar, when we talk about shifting to any form of clean energy, there are lots of cost considerations that come into the picture, which is why we have not been able to, at scale, shift to clean energy forms, right? And there, the economic side of things really takes precedence over the social and the environmental. But yes, when we look at the social and environmental side of things, there's a lot that goes into really trying to see how we can conserve energy, since we know that it is used or is coming from a coal or a dirty kind of source, right? Something that you need to also understand, and maybe it's useful to kind of pitch in at this point, is the COP26 happened in November. The COP is the Conference of Parties, which happens every year or few years, where important countries kind of come together and discuss, and their conclusion, or for the first time, their conclusion was also involving fossil fuel transition, right? So fossil fuel transition away from coal sources, right? And then there are NDCs, which is nationally determined contributions, which is every country makes some commitments nationally कि हम ये करेंगे, हम वो करेंगे. One of the very big NDCs that's coming in from a couple of countries now, and more so developed economies, is this fossil fuel transition thing, that they want to move away from coal. It's a very slow process, so therefore it is difficult to kind of see change overnight, and that's true for any kind of sustainability thing that's being done at a government level. Since I've worked with the government before, I can say that with confidence. When we look at the social and the environmental side of things, it's a lot about awareness generation. People awareness generation, but also action that is following that awareness, right? A lot of times, people say that हाँ हमें पता है इसके बारे में, but हमें कुछ करना नहीं है because we don't see the impact for ourselves. But it's about that thought process, that you think futuristically and you think from a social lens, that what will happen to the community, what will happen to other people, or what will happen to, I mean, most of us in this room are still young, but what will happen to my child? Or maybe you have a niece or a nephew, right? What kind of a world will your niece and nephew see, right? Or experience, right? So you wouldn't want to kind of, if you keep that in mind, then probably you'll take any kind of action, not just for dirty, energy sources, but for anything in life. If you're looking at a futuristic, going back to all the inputs that we got,
So Zitin, I'll just
sustainability
pitch
is
in
future,
here.
etc.
I think what
Sure,
she
sure.
brought out was a very, very pertinent question of our
Yeah.
priorities. COP
Yes.
happened in November when there was no
Yeah.
war between Russia and Ukraine.
Correct.
The sources of energies were clear, were the gases which are coming from the Ukraine. And there they were talking big about how they want to reduce it. But unfortunately, the last 6 months has shown them that their priorities have suddenly changed. Now they want their roti, kapra, and makan, their Maslow's hierarchy of basic things intact. So that is how they've changed it. That's what she was referring to when she said now they're switching to coal because that is a better and a cheaper and an available source of energy for them than going to gases which are not available or are being given at a high cost. So many a times we change our priority based on our own needs and then we switch over. And talking about coal being used, and we recently had a guy from California who's working in a company in Phuket in Thailand, and he's working
Right.
on a chula which the company can develop, which can reduce these emissions. And he's just simply patented an idea of, he came to our university, went to a village at top, we here most of the villages use this fuel from the woods from the
Yeah.
jungles, and
Yes.
he in a simplified innovative way could use an innovative style where the consumption was reduced by 50% and the carbon dioxide emission was reduced by almost 25%. So things are there. We need to change. But unfortunately, bigger European countries are now more bothered about their own basic living than actually talking about carbon dioxide emissions and COP10. So I really appreciate this girl who has brought out a very, very socialistic, economical, and environmental question in one, all the three aspects in one question.
100%. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing that. Definitely, yeah. I mean, cost considerations, politics, all that plays a very important role when we talk about scale. But I guess, going beyond scale and looking beyond what governments are doing, if we try to, take steps ourselves to see what we can do in our community as well, then those, efforts do add up. And that was one of the reasons why I also kind of took to sustainability, because I got frustrated looking at things and these kind of challenges around me, and I said, okay, let's do something. Let's not wait for the government to do something, but let's do something ourselves as well. Right. So definitely, yeah, definitely. Thank you for bringing up that question. That was very insightful. And thank you, sir, for your very valuable inputs. I think I'll have to move now because of time constraints, but we'll come back in the Q&A session to any more questions. Does that answer help you in any way? I'm so sorry, I missed your name. Can't recall your name. I hope the answer was helpful. Okay, great. Let's move to
My name is
a quick.
Shatakshi. Sorry to
Sorry.
interrupt you. My name is Shatakshi.
Okay, thanks, Shatakshi. Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Okay, so we'll take a quick quiz. Anyone recalls what are the 3 Ps of sustainability?
Hello, my name is Kanchan. I am a research
Hi.
scholar, PhD in education in Eternal University. I think,
Hi,
according
Kanchan.
to me, people, planet,
Hmm.
and performance will be the correct answer.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
Thank you.
Congratulations. It is the correct answer. Thank you, Kanchan. Okay, wonderful. Let's move to the next step. Why is sustainability important? We all have been discussing that, over and over, why sustainability is important, renewable energy, and various aspects of sustainability. I want to just pause here and show you a quick video, which we recently released. It's not recent now, it's been over a month. But this video will give you a quick idea about, like, how things go. I'm just going to stop presenting and present again once the screen is up. So just give me 2 seconds to set this up. Is this visible? Is this visible? Then I'll start playing.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks. You can drop the ma'am. Okay, I'm going to start playing. Okay. I'm just gonna go back to the slides. That was visible and audible, right? I hope.
Yes, it was visible
Okay.
and audible.
Thank you so much. Okay, so basically, it was essentially about trying to give you a primer on the business case for sustainability. Since we're talking about the SDGs and entrepreneurship today, I wanted to focus on really what is the business case for sustainability. Why should businesses also look at sustainability more seriously? So that was kind of divided into three parts, which is your prospective employees are asking for sustainable organizations, your consumers are asking for sustainable products, and of course investors are looking at sustainability very seriously. So when we look at the major kind of three sections as to why sustainability in general is also important, one is that considerations of people and planet are really interlinked, right? We talked about interlinkage very closely when we discussed about the social, environmental, and the economic aspects, right? When Sir gave his introductory remarks, he mentioned about people-driven activities, right? Humans driving those activities which are causing, let's say, degradation of the environment, to begin with, and and us not respecting the fact that the planet comes first when it has its duties to also protect the people. But if we abuse the planet, obviously, it will not be in the right state or in the right health to also protect us as humans, right? Because right now there's no planet B. Of course, Mr. Musk is working on Mars, but that's still a long way off, I believe. The second are societal concerns, right? We spoke a little bit about human rights, diversity, issues of inequality, which actually hinder sustainable progress of any economy, whether it's developed or developing. And last is it's almost like a business necessity, businesses can kind of thrive if they look at sustainability more seriously. We'll look at a couple of examples in the next section on that. But also consumers, employees, investors, right? The three stakeholders, if you will, which actually look at how businesses can kind of contribute, right? And going back to the video that kind of brought in some stats, some global stats actually, to substantiate why consumers, prospective employees, and investors all are important in the journey of business sustainability. What are the SDGs? Okay, anyone wants to take a shot at this? What are the SDGs? I'm sure a lot of you know about it, but anyone wants to kind of talk about it maybe in a minute? So I've kept this section brief because I was told you all are taught about the SDGs. So if anyone wants to try and talk about it maybe in a minute,
Hey
that would be
Zitin,
nice.
am I audible to you?
Oh, yes, yes, you are.
Yeah, hi, my name is Bhuvi, and I think SDGs full form is Sustainable Development Goals. It was
Yes,
launched in 2015, and as
yes,
you mentioned earlier, it was mainly focused on social and environmental changes happening. So to restrain it, or to it is an agenda to restrain it, the environmental changes and the social changes, I think I guess it.
Yes, that's right. That's right, Bhuvi. They were formulated in 2015, but they came into action in 2016. So just to take a step back from the SDGs, let's look at global guiding principles on sustainability. There are a couple of guiding principles. Again, these are indicative. There are a lot more guiding principles, but just for your information, I've noted some on the left hand side of this slide. If you look at this set, right? So there is the United Nations as a guiding principle body, which basically talks a lot about sustainability, sustainable development, various aspects of sustainability. UN has several agencies. There is UNDP, where I worked for briefly, and then there is UNHCR. There is lots of different. So there's UNICEF, etc., etc. Right? So they look at different aspects like child rights, like human rights, like overall sustainable development, and so on and so forth. Then there's the PRI, which is again through the United Nations, the principles of responsible investment, or principles for rather responsible investment. This is the PRI framework essentially talks about how investors can look at making more smarter choices when it comes to investing in different companies. So they can use the PRI framework at their end, right? Then there's the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, WBCSD, which is essentially a consortium of different companies across the world which are looking at sustainability and various sustainable initiatives. The WBCSD also has certain sector specific groups, right? So there is the most recent one was with the auto industry, the automobile industry, and looking at how the automobile waste, metal waste, can be more effectively used. So they keep working on such consortiums so that there are practical examples of sustainability in certain sectors or industries. And apart from those which are mentioned here, some very important frameworks and guiding principles are also the GRI, which is the Global Reporting Initiative, which is used more for sustainability reporting among businesses. The SASB, which is the Sustainability Accountings and Standards Board, again, which is used more globally. So GRI is used a lot in India and in other developing markets as well, but it's also used in developed markets. So it's that way, it's more universal. Um, there's SASB, and then there is also TCFD, which is the Task Force on Climate Change related disclosures. So these are some of the frameworks which govern sustainability reporting and sustainability at large. And then, of course, more recently, the mother of them all has come, which is the SDGs, which were as Bhuvi mentioned, were created in 2015, but they came into effect in January 2016 for 193 nations, which came together, including India. Um, so, yeah, this is what the SDGs are. I'm sure most of you know about it. These are just like breaking them down into the 17 activities, or the 17 rather larger goals. And I'm going to break into a quick quiz now. How many targets do you think these goals might have? So you have these goals, but then there are targets under these goals. So if there's no poverty, there are certain targets which are underlying, achievement of that no poverty thing. So how many do you think these have? Or if you've already learnt about it, you might know the number. Anyone wants to take a shot? Anyone knows the answer?
I
It's
guess it's
kind of
17.
So there's
17 is
17 goals,
the number of goals.
169 targets.
That's right. That's right. That's right. It's 169 targets. That's right. Yeah, this was a really tough one. So kudos. Thank you so much for sharing that. So yeah. So 17 is the number of goals. So these are the larger goals, and then there's 169 targets under these goals. Yeah, which are basically ways in which ways in which we will reach that goal. As a world as a whole, right? So let's move. Oh, yes, this is a very important point which I wanted to kind of briefly talk about. This diagram basically shows the interlinkage or interconnectivity between different SDGs. So, what's special about the SDGs is that it recognizes the interlinkage between the various factors. Before the SDGs, we also had something called as the MDGs, which is the Millennium Development Goals. Millennium Development Goals were from 2000 to 2015. But what happened in those was that it was very, very tight, and it was not they were not recognizing the relationship between each of the 8 goals. It contained 8 goals, and so that became a problem child, and therefore, all the United Nations, of course, facilitated the different countries which came together and said, "Hey, the MDGs are not working out. We've achieved only 60% of them, and that's not a good enough number. Can we think about this differently for the post 2015 agenda?" Right. So in 2013, all those discussions really started around the post 2015 agenda. And what SDGs recognize is, as you can see on this diagram, is the interconnectivity, right? So if you take the example of, let's say, no poverty, right? No poverty is going in and stopping at, let's say, agriculture, and that's linking up to um, 12, which is responsible consumption and production, right? Because agriculture is one of the important factors which determines how to basically engage with farmers so that there is lesser poverty, but also how to engage with businesses so that there is better and more responsible consumption and production, both from the farmer's side but also from a processing side of things, when businesses actually take those farm-led products, etc. Right? It also links to, if you see, it also links to life below water, and the reason for that is that agriculture as a sector also includes your fisheries, right? And other kind of work that is done to preserve life below water, right? And or also contamination, preventing contamination of water, using water more judiciously as well. um, so that's also the reason why it links up to clean water and sanitation as well, right? So all the bore wells, all the work that is done on the farmland to help both life below water, but also, if you see, there's one gray line going to life on land, right? Because again, we're contributing to biodiversity, to the life of bees, so that there's more pollination, to birds who come, and so on, right? And they find shelter in these trees and other agro products, or agricultural, basically plantations, etc. So I mean, there are a lot other lines going, in all directions, but I just wanted to take one example as a case to show you that they've really worked on trying to understand the linkage between all these, right? And looking at factors which are important, right? So the factors in the center of this circle are differing in size. The reason is, the more impactful these factors are, the larger they are in size. So infrastructure is important, resource efficiency is important, energy is important. If you see, these factors have actually come in all our discussions in the last hour or so. So that's quite an interesting mix there, right? So this is really just to give you a sense of how broad the SDGs are, but how related they are also. So now let's get to the core of everything, which is essentially sustainable entrepreneurship, right? So essentially sustainable entrepreneurship, this was an equation we formulated at Nextmile Co when we released our first annual report last year. We tried to see if there is one equation or one small visual which can help somebody to understand what is a sustainable enterprise, right? So we came up with this quick equation, which is business multiplied by sustainability essentially is equal to good for people, good for planet, and good for performance. What does this mean? This means that any business looking at sustainability in some form or the other essentially means they are taking some action which is good for either of the 3 P's. I mean, if it's all the 3 P's, that's fantastic, but at least one of the 3 P's: people, planet, and or performance, right? Now, let's look at a very important concept which I had mentioned briefly in the introductory slides. It was around life cycle management earlier. But when we look at the value chain concept, it's a little more larger concept as compared to the LCA, or the life cycle assessment is what we call it, or life cycle management. Life cycle management is used more in the product side of things. a value chain can be used for product or service led businesses. So this concept is important because it will help you to think more deeply at what the journey of a particular product is. I gave you an example of the journey of that chip packet, right? Starting with procuring the raw material or the potatoes from the farm, right? Going into production or manufacturing, going to trade, aggregation, where your distributor is sitting, right, waiting for those chip packets, and then going finally to your consumer. This aggregation and trade would include your distributors and your retailers and your stores, who finally are the linkage point between the company and the consumer, which is you and I, right? So this is effectively your immediate business value chain. These are the 4 steps which are involved in your immediate value chain. This is more used for product led businesses, right? When you look at service led businesses, it will be a similar cycle, but it will be more on the side of planning, designing, and execution, and then your client, whoever your client is. These 4 steps will be replaced by those 4 steps. Yeah. So this effectively is your immediate business value chain, and then there's something that goes before but also goes beyond. Okay, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But let me throw in a question here. So accurate product labeling of ingredients on the part on let's say any product would form what part of the business value chain? Would it form the first procuring raw materials, or would it be a part of aggregation or trade? Would it be end consumer? Which is the most impactful stage where it will impact the most, your product labeling? Where will it impact the most, or where should it impact the most? Let's put it that way. Any guesses on this?
Hello, ma'am. I'm Saman.
Hello.
According to
Hi.
me, the answer would be end consumer.
That's right, Saman. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're
It
welcome.
would be end consumer. And the reason for that is essentially a consumer has the right to know what is effectively inside that chip packet, or that tomato ketchup, or that whatever product it is, right? So a product labeling, while it occurs actually at this stage, right, where you are in production and you are finally putting label chipka rahe ho aap product pe, but the final impact that it has to make is for the consumer, right? So we have these, you might have seen these triangular arrows which shows that this product is recyclable, or it is recycled, or it is, let's say, harmful. There are certain numbers which are allotted to each, which give you some information on disposal, right? Here in this question particularly, I have spoken about product labeling of ingredients. That is, what does this product really contain? What am I really consuming? So definitely that would be end consumer. So any kind of communication that's going on your label is rather meant for consumers. So going back to the value chain concept, I mentioned there's something before and there's something after, right? So this is a level 2 breakdown of the value chain, which we discussed earlier. So the second line, which you can see below, is effectively all the factors, not all, but some of the indicative factors which contribute to level 1, right? So let's say procuring raw materials. At this point, logistics is very important, because when you take that potato from the farm, you're also doing a quality check. You're also keeping your logistics ready, so you can transport those potatoes from the farm to the manufacturing unit, to your factory, effectively, right? So logistics and quality check should be in place. Similarly, at the factory, you need to have your transport, you need to do your packaging properly. Again, you need to do a quality check properly, right? At your trade and aggregation space, again, your transport going to your customer, etc. Your storage is important, your packaging is important, and your quality check, right, at that stage. And finally, at the end consumer stage, it is very important to look at factors such as marketing, such as pricing, is that suitable for the consumer, and your end of life or circular process, right? End of life essentially is that chip packet ending up in the dustbin, and or you doing something with that chip packet. I'll talk about that. I know I've been delaying this, but I'll talk about it when we get to the examples, right? So what do you do with that packet, right? At after or before you actually put it in the bin, you can do something with it. So let me quickly talk about the two concepts of traceability and community. We spoke a little bit about community, so I'm going to get to community first. Community outreach, if you recall the social yellow circle that we talked about earlier, essentially community could be a part of any of these processes, as well as we mentioned about community outreach, but it can also go beyond, right? So when it takes the form of social welfare, you might want to look at your community surrounding your immediate community, right? And or a community that is not yet affected or impacted by your products, but effectively they could be your prospective consumers in the future. But that's not the reason why you engage in this activity. You engage in this activity for empowering a community through your social welfare activities. So that would come outside your immediate business value chain. But as a concept, community empowerment can happen through your business, because you might be employing people in your, let's say, your production process, right? The shop floor people, the people working at your factory. You might be empowering that farmer, right? The one who's working at the potato farm, or the traders who are in the process, right? So that would also mean you are empowering community within the process, but also beyond, right? And then there is the concept of traceability. A lot of companies are focusing now on transparency, which is how do we report maximum information about our products and about our offerings so that the consumer is fully informed. One of the areas is traceability, which is going back to the origin of the origin, basically, right? So that packet of chips that I'm consuming, where did the potato really come from? Do I really know? Can I see that at the back of pack? Right now, maybe not. But traceability looks at that. Traceability is essentially the ability to trace. That's what traceability is, right? The ability to trace the origins of where the initial raw material is really coming from. Why is this important? This is important, one, for transparency, but also for allowing the consumer to know more about, what is the community that they are impacting. And the third reason is also about certain sensitive products or certain sensitive raw materials. So I'll give you an example. Palm oil is a very sensitive raw material which is used in many personal care products. Palm oil, basically, for many years, palm oil plantations in Indonesia, particularly, and that side, or the Southeast Asian belt, have seen a lot of deforestation. So that's when the concept or the idea of traceability started, because people wanted to avert the likelihood of deforestation, and therefore a traceability exercise had to be conducted to understand, okay, is this coming from a deforested palm oil plantation, right? Or is it coming from a certified sustainable palm oil plantation? So that led to, in the case of palm oil, it led to the RSPO, which is the Round Table on Sustainable Palm Oil. It's a global organization which actually works for anti-deforestation of palm oil and looking at sustainable palm oil particularly. So the traceability concept can be used in case of any raw material, but yes, the concept has become more kind of obvious after the palm oil issues that cropped up a few years ago. So those are really the two concepts here. I want to pause here and ask, can community development be a part of company's business value chain, or does it have to only be outside of the immediate business value chain? So community development can be a part of a company's business value chain and or outside. So is that true or is that false? We spoke about it briefly. If anyone wants to take a shot at this.
of the opinion it is true.
That's right. So that's right. So it is true. Community development, depending on how it is conducted, it can be a part of the company's business value chain. As the example I gave, people working on in your factory, or traders that you are empowering, or the farmer, right? Or it can be outside your immediate business value chain, but prospective communities which are surrounding your, immediate business communities, where you are impacting the consumers or prospective consumers. So let's get into the core of the core, which is the two types of sustainable enterprises. Essentially, are social enterprise and regular businesses. A social enterprise essentially is a company that provides products or services which are keeping the principles of people, planet, performance at the base, right? Through the products and services that they give. And a regular businesses would be any regular business which is doing its normal activity, but it is looking at how it can make its operations more sustainable, or marketing more sustainable, or communication more sustainable, or look at employee sustainability in its entire value chain, which is why we went through the concept of value chain in the last few slides. So let's look at the social enterprise concept. What's the concept of a social enterprise? Is essentially, the main driving force is not so much profits or the cash, but more of helping the world around us, right? How do we help communities? How do we help the environment through the products and services that are created? I want to get into some examples, but before that, I want to pause and ask in the audience: any of y'all know of any social enterprises? Considering now we know the definition of social enterprises, any examples that come to your
The
mind?
place where you are giving a talk is an excellent example. Kalgiga Trust cannot be a
Yes,
better example than Kalgiga Trust for social enterprise.
yes, absolutely. So social enterprises usually are business outfits which are profit generating, but at the same time they are also creating products which are good for either society and or entrepreneurship, or and or for your environment, etc., etc. So I'm just going to give a couple of examples, and then switch to the next section of regular businesses. So one example I wanted to share is Connecting NER. Connecting NER, essentially, NER stands for Northeast Region. They are basically headquartered in Guwahati area of Assam, which is in Northeast India. And it is essentially an online platform which curates sustainable items which are handcrafted by the artisans of Northeast India. The idea here was to give the artisans their due respect. What is happening in the Northeast region, and because I've spent 2 years there, I can say this with confidence, is that a lot of times states within Northeast India are not able to kind of connect with each other because infrastructure is poor, but also there are so many different tribes and different types of communities. I mean, the small state where I was in, Nagaland, Nagaland itself has 17 tribes and more than 80 sub-tribes. So these are people who don't even speak the same language in the same state, right? So it's very difficult for them to also communicate, but also reach out to the right people so that they can really reach out to their so let's say in the handicraft sector or the artisan sector, they can actually reach the consumer who is willing to pay the rightful price for all the efforts that the artisan has put in. Any Now that we know a little bit about Connecting NER, any guesses on what type of SDGs this might be contributing towards? So I'll give you one example. Definitely, decent work and economic growth is one. Any other example that's coming to your mind? Any other SDG that comes to you? Okay, let me help you with another. There is reduced inequalities because they are working towards, reducing the inequality amongst a particular community, which is the artisan community. One more, any other? Okay. The other one would also be responsible consumption and production, and the reason for that is that the production cycle of artisans is usually very sustainable because they look at local resources like bamboo, for example. Right, in Northeast India, you have great bamboo plantations. So there's a responsible production cycle to this, and effectively also responsible consumption, because the person who's buying this product is also then consuming something which is more responsible. Rather than buying a plastic fruit basket in the kitchen, he or she is buying a bamboo fruit basket, right? Just as an example. So it is utilitarian from the consumption end, but also at the production end, right? So that's one example of a product led business. This is an example of a service led business. It's called Livable. And Livable, essentially, it's a consulting firm just like us, but they look at specifically helping companies to become climate neutral, right? And take action. So in fact, we're working with Livable at the moment on a particular project, which is going to be Bangalore's first carbon neutral event on corporate gifting. That's with one of our most long standing clients into corporate gifting and sustainable gifting. So essentially, this company guides other companies on how to take climate action and how to restore, the ecosystem, and help them to take action in that process of, calculating the emissions, but also saying that, okay, now you have so many emissions, let's offset them by planting these many trees, for example, right? So this is what they look at. Any idea? Anyone wants to take a shot at what type of SDGs this might be contributing towards? This one is easy. You have some keywords right here on the slide.
Climate action.
Yes, that's right. Climate action for sure. This is also another one. Climate action, yes. And any others that come to your mind, or anyone else? So climate action, definitely. There's responsible consumption and production, again, because the advisory practice is helping companies to become climate neutral. They're also producing more responsibly. Whatever the company is doing, it's producing more responsibly, and as a result, there's responsible consumption as well. And then there's also life on land, right? Because if we talk about climate neutrality, of course, there's life on land, but there's also life below water, depending on what type of climate neutral actions are being taken by the particular company in consideration. So this is about Livable, which is in Bengaluru city of South India, Karnataka. Another enterprise which is also based in Bengaluru city is Bare Necessities Zero Waste. They essentially, it's like a green e-commerce store. So Bare Necessities is a green e-commerce store in a sense, but they also have a learning ecosystem or a platform to understand more about zero waste lifestyle and low waste lifestyle or low waste living, right? Um, so it's a place where you can buy low waste products, zero waste products, and these products range from bamboo toothbrush to sustainable toothpaste in a glass bottle rather than using it in a tube, and so on and so forth. So it looks at the essential idea was to understand the consumer better, but also look at a earth centered approach or an eco friendly approach, so that they can basically create a green e-commerce store of sorts, which they are operating at the moment. So one definitely is they want to build sustainable cities and communities around the area. So that's goal number 11. There's also, of course, responsible consumption and production, right? Because as a consumer, if I'm not buying a toothpaste which is in a tube, because toothpaste tubes are probably one of the toughest to degrade, by the way, if you did not already know that. So that is one big problem that they do look at. So it is like a tooth powder that they have in a small glass bottle, which can be used as well, and it works equally well. And of course, there's climate action as one of the other goals as well, because they're looking at a lot of, like as I mentioned, earth centered approach. So there's a lot of work around the environment and low waste or zero waste products. So that's really about bare necessities. I want to now go into one or two examples looking at the value chain approach, from the point of view of a sustainable or a social enterprise. So let's look at the example of Coco Trade. Coco Trade is a company which is headquartered in Chennai, South India, in Tamil Nadu, and it is essentially a sustainable luxury single origin organic and planet friendly bean to bar chocolate, contributing to a circular economy. Now, what does this complicated sentence essentially mean? It essentially means it is a sustainable chocolate company which is looking at the circular economy approach. If you recall the value chain diagram, I had mentioned about the end consumer phase having an end of life and or a circular approach, right? Where I gave the example of the chip. Instead of throwing it in the dustbin, can it go to some other place, right? And not to the landfill. Essentially, a circular economy approach talks about a circle, not a linear. When I spoke about the earlier example or the earlier diagram, this is linear, right? It's in one line from raw material to the end consumer and then in the dustbin, probably, right? But can this from the end consumer come back to, let's say, this, right? So that from the end consumer, it reaches the factory again to make something else more purposeful or something else which is more useful for, you know, the next cycle of products. So making it circular, right? What's unique about this and why is it a sustainable chocolate is also because it's plastic, paper, wood pulp, and tree free completely. You know, their packaging, etc. It's all this. It's completely free of all this. So let's look at their value chain. Um, let's look at the first stage, which is, you know, raw material, right? So at the cocoa farm, they do not use any machinery to dry the cocoa beans, right? They usually use a sun drying process. They have no child labor. They have actually also have a all women farm, so all their entire farm is all women, just like the university. And then they you know, have fair wages for their you know, farmers. One area which is marked in red is because it's a very big problem child for them. They are still trying to work on it, which is that cocoa farming as a process is very water intensive by itself. So if there is some water residue that's left over, and that's called gray water as a concept. Gray water is essentially the wastewater that comes out of any process. So let's say if they are able to collect some of the gray water, they actually use it in their flushing purposes in their offices. Yeah, it's transported to their office, which is nearby, and it's used for flushing purposes. Then moving to the initiatives in their manufacturing piece, they use ingredients which are natural. So they will use non-refined sweeteners. So अपने normal chocolates में क्या sugar use होता है? इसमें they use jaggery, for example, right? That's one of the non-refined sweeteners that they use in their chocolates. And they also do not use regular cocoa butter. It's cold pressed cocoa butter, which is much healthier and a more sustainable one. And they use real spices, real rose petals, etc., depending on the flavor of the chocolate. At the consumer end, they have a lot of activities. One is, you know, in the packaging itself, the packaging is plastic and tree free. The secondary packaging, which is the cover I showed you earlier, this cover, it's actually made out of a mix of organic cotton and also waste from their cocoa shells. You know, the cocoa beans को जब harvest करते हैं उसमें shells निकलते हैं. So just those shells, instead of wasting them and throwing them, they actually process them with organic cotton, and that's how the cover of the chocolate is made. Okay, and then the aluminium foil, of course, which is internally used, that's anyway recyclable. But also the ink which is on top of this covering is a water-based ink. What does that mean? It means that if you throw this wrapper anywhere in the soil, it's not going to contaminate the soil. It will decompose in the soil because it is made out of biodegradable material. The other thing that they've very interesting thing that they've done is they also have a wrapper return program. The wrapper can actually be posted back to them. So they provide you with an envelope and it can be posted back to them, to their offices, which they will use again. So that makes the process more circular. The other thing that they also have is the outer box that you get as a result of, you know, like your order, you know, suppose you order a Cocoa Trade, you know, box of 2 chocolates or whatever. The box itself can actually be used, actually it has some DIY instructions, do it yourself instructions, where you can make a mobile holder, You can make a tablet holder. You can make a pen stand holder, etc. With that box by folding it in particular fashion. So then that box is also used, for something utility based. So these are some of the end consumer things that they have implemented for the same. So which SDG primarily do you think Cocoa Trade contributes towards? Would it be 1, which is no poverty, 7, which is affordable and clean energy? Would it be 12, which is responsible consumption and production, or would it be 5, which is gender equality? Primarily. Any guesses? Sorry? Sorry, was someone saying something? I think I missed.
Ma'am, responsible consumption by all.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Thank you so much. I didn't get your name.
Ma'am, I'm Saman.
Oh, hi. Thanks, someone. Okay, great. Yeah, that's right. So it's responsible consumption and production. That's the goal that they would be primarily contributing towards, because all their activities are a lot, around, end consumer activities and also production in a very clean and green way. Let's now talk about another service-based enterprise. So this was a product-based enterprise. We'll talk about a service-based one, which is Planet-Abled. Planet-Abled essentially, it's headquartered in, I think, in Mumbai, but they have operations across India. They provide accessible travel solutions and leisure excursions for people who have different types of disabilities. It could be, hearing disabilities. You could be visually impaired, physically, having some kind of disabilities, or mental disabilities as well. So it essentially gives the freedom of, travel to PWDs. Now, how did the story of Planetable come about? You should read about it on their website. They have a great website. You can read about the founder's story. Neha usually was always, like, deprived in her childhood because both her parents are PWDs. They have different forms of disabilities, and therefore because of that, she was not able to really travel. And early in her 20s, she decided that, okay, no, I need to do something about this issue. Let me kind of see if I can do something. And so their activities are very end consumer focused. Essentially, they work on accessibility and creating experiences for PWDs. And these, by the way, these PWDs could also be PWDs who are of any type of age. Okay, it could be and type. So it could be a solo traveler who's a PWD. It's a person with, could be a person with disability who's a child, right? Or a couple, or it could be senior citizens, right? And they also have something very interesting which is called as a travel buddy program. Travel buddy program is essentially, if I sign up as a travel buddy on Planetabled, if someone in their database is coming to Sirmaur, for example, or to Himachal, or let's say, to wherever I'm based, right? I could basically show them my town, my city, my village, etc. Right? So I become a travel buddy for them. So you get to interact with someone who has come on a travel, excursion, etc. Here, and assist them and show them your place. Now, which SDG do you think Planetable contributes towards? Again, primarily, would it be zero hunger? Would it be reduced inequalities? Would it be responsible consumption and production, or would it be peace, justice, and strong institutions? Anyone to take a shot on this?
Reduce inequalities.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much for sharing that. Wonderful. Okay. Let's move to the next section, which is on regular businesses. So the idea for regular business is a little different from social enterprises. Here, regular businesses are those which want to create financial value, and that's the primary focus of regular businesses. But regular businesses who are purposeful, or who understand the value of sustainability, are those which actually want to create a core business sustainable model of business model which is sustainable over the long term, right? Which contributes to long-term business growth, which helps financial performance, but also impacts sustainability metrics. There are a couple of regular businesses in action. I'll give you a couple of examples. One is IKEA. So IKEA is essentially, into home furnishings, bathroom products, etc. Their core business strategy is so IKEA is a global company. It's European. Its origins are in Europe, and the main strategy that the business strategy itself is to be people and planet positive, right? And what they say is, and read this line very carefully, for us, it's about balancing economic growth and positive social impact with environmental protection and renewal. If you read this line, you will see the three circles appearing as you progress across reading this line. So, balancing economic growth, right? The blue circle, positive social impact, the yellow circle, and environmental protection and renewal, which is essentially the green circle. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about a case in point that they have. As IKEA, they have bathroom fittings as well, bathroom products. And talking a little bit about energy saving and water, essentially, their kind of bathroom fittings are basically designed so that they can save energy and they can save water. So if we look at the image on the right hand side, it's a shower that actually regulates the water flow depending on how much you need it, right? So there's a button which regulates the water flow, and that is more like a, I don't know if you have seen, there is an external sprinkler that you get on a tap as well. So that's the one that they use on the tap. But in the shower, it's more like the water sprinkles, and then it can come as a gushing flow, but it can also come as like sprinklers, which is effectively the most easiest kind of way to save water, right? Um, and then there is, the tap in the bathroom, which can be used, the hot, I mean, it has, obviously you might have seen this at many places, it has a hot and a cold. But as soon as you switch on the hot, it's not that it gives out cold water first and then you have to wait until the hot water comes. It has a technology to immediately start the hot water as soon as you kind of shift it to the other side. In many cases, you have to wait कि हाँ गर्म पानी है तो आएगा in some time. But they have a technology which allows unnecessarily wasting that water, right? So that's on the bathroom fittings. Now, when we break down the value chain of this, they've installed a technology to reduce water waste, but also they've incorporated changes to suit consumer needs and consumer ease of use. A lot of times people complain, अरे यार wait करना पड़ता है कि आ नहीं है पानी, it's not coming, right? So what have they done for the end consumer? They've essentially installed those. One is of course sensors, but they also have these, switchable. What do you call those? The handle which allows you to kind of switch between hot and cold very easily. But at the same time, it is saving water and electricity in the case of, let's say, the shower, right? Which allows you to remove the lesser water rather than gushing water. Because anyway, shower bath, I mean, having a bath in the shower is always more wasteful than a bucket bath. So which SDG do you think this activity of IKEA contributes towards? Quality education, reduced inequalities, climate action, or is it good health and well-being?
Climate action.
That's right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Great. So climate action, yeah, naturally, because it's saving water and electricity, it contributes to that. Next, I want to take an example of a project that we did at Nextmile Co with corporate gifting industry. The corporate gifting industry, I mentioned fleetingly about it, that we are going to be launching Bangalore's first carbon neutral event in corporate gifting. So essentially, this is a corporate gifting company which has been working in the space of corporate gifting for almost 15 years, and then the founder and CEO came to me and he's like, Zitin, I want to do something different. I'm like fed up of doing the regular corporate gifting. Like, so just for your understanding, corporate gifting is essentially gifts that are received by employees of larger corporations or companies on different occasions. So Diwali ho gayi ya koi festival ho gaya, suppose, or like New Year, or if a new employee is joining, right? Or if somebody is retiring, there are some gifts which are given, right? For acknowledging that particular festival or acknowledging their achievements in the organization. So the CEO came and he's like, yeah, I want to do something different, so we essentially crafted a completely new brand. And what my suggestion to him was that you keep your regular business running because your clients keep coming back to you, but at the same time, let's help you launch a completely new brand. And that brand can basically help you build the sustainable corporate gifting side of things. So what we did was that we suggested various types of sustainable product materials, product ideas which are relevant to the corporate space, but also packaging material. A lot of times packaging material gets ignored. So what are those different types of packaging materials? Both primary packaging, which is like the immediately surrounding your product, but also secondary packaging, which is the box outside, right? How do we make that more sustainable? And now we're finally having the physical launch of Brand Rafter, which is going to happen next month. So that's going to be Bangalore's first carbon neutral event. And we're doing that in collaboration with Livable. I gave you an example of Livable and the work that they do in climate neutrality. So that's what we're doing with them in Bengaluru.
जितिन,
Uh, yeah.
कैन आई मैं हिंदी में आपसे क्वेश्चन पूछ सकती हूँ, आप जवाब
जी,
देंगी? समझ
हाँ
सकती
जी,
हैं
हाँ
हिंदी?
जी, जी।
अच्छा, जो आपने एग्जाम्पल दिए ना, मुझे एक चीज़ बताइए, वो अमेरिका और अगर इंडिया की बात करें हम, तो
जी।
जो भी आपने जैसे बैम्बू का बताया या आपने बताया जितने कॉरपोरेट गिफ्ट्स के लिए बताया, ये एक अपर हाई क्लास के लिए हैं। तो अगर एक आम इंसान बिजनेस शुरू करेगा तो वो इतनी फंड्स कहाँ से लाएगा और उस कैटेगरी को कैसे वो अप्रोच करेगा? क्योंकि ऑलरेडी जो बड़े जैसे आइकिया की बात कर रहे हैं, तो एक आम इंसान कैसे उसको ग्रो करेगा कि वो उससे compete कर पाए? उसके पास इतने फंड्स कहाँ होंगे? तो एक एवरेज मीडियोकर पर्सन के लिए वो बिजनेस बताइए जो एक एवरेज इंसान, उसको मिडिल फैमिली का इंसान उसको कर सके। क्योंकि जो ये आप बता रहे हैं वो अगर कोरोना के बाद हम देखें तो इंडिया में अभी इस समय खाने के लिए ही मुश्किल से पैसे हैं। तो उस सिनेरियो को देखते हुए कैसे हम उसको कर सकते हैं? क्या वो आइडियाज आपके पास हैं?
जी, इस सवाल के लिए धन्यवाद। आई थिंक आपने बहुत अच्छा सवाल पूछा है, और जो भी मैंने आइडियाज आपको दिए हैं पहले, जो नॉर्थ ईस्ट में, जैसे ये सारी आम जनता है बाय द वे, ये सब मिडिल क्लास से हैं। कनेक्टिंग एनईआर के जो 2 फाउंडर्स हैं, बिल्कुल मिडिल क्लास से हैं। लिटरली उन्होंने अपने घर से चल के दे हैव गॉन टू टॉक टू आर्टिजन्स, और उन्होंने उनको साथ में लाया है। आई अंडरस्टैंड के फंडिंग और पैसे बहुत ज़रूरी हैं आपकी किसी भी बिजनेस को खोलने के लिए, पर पैसा ही एक चीज़ नहीं है। मैंने नेक्स्टमाइल को 0 फंड से शुरू किया था। मैंने नेक्स्टमाइल को इसलिए शुरू किया था ताकि मैं दूसरे इंडस्ट्रीज से कनेक्ट कर पाऊँ और उनको एम्पावर कर पाऊँ। और अगर आप मेरा भी बिजनेस मॉडल देखेंगे तो आपको पता चलेगा कि इट इज कंसल्टिंग ऐसी चीज है कि आप 0 फंड से शुरू कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि आपकी नॉलेज ही आपकी पावर बन जाती है। तो जो भी आपने नॉलेज गेन किया है, जो आप एक्सपर्टीज जिस एरिया में रखते हैं, अगर उसको आप बेस बना के चलें और अगर आप उससे शुरू करें कि आप एडवाइजरी उसमें दें या उसमें एडवाइस कर रहे हैं दूसरे लोगों को या उनको किसी भी तरीके से एम्पावर कर रहे हैं, एक्चुअली दैट इज अ मोर लो कॉस्ट मॉडल। कोई भी प्रोडक्ट बेस्ड बिजनेस, यस, थोड़ा सा फंडिंग उसमें रिक्वायर्ड होता है। लाइक दिस इज अ प्रोडक्ट बेस्ड बिजनेस। लिवेबल, मैं दोनों फाउंडर्स को जानती हूँ। दे आर बोथ मिडिल क्लास, फ्रॉम मिडिल क्लास फैमिली इन बैंगलोर। दे बेसिकली उन्होंने क्या किया है कि उन्होंने अपनी एक्सपर्टीज एरिया को एप्लीकेशन में डाला, और फिर जैसे हम रीच आउट करते हैं अलग अलग, आजकल सोशल मीडिया और फोन्स आर मोर इजीली एक्सेसिबल देन पहले, राइट? सो अगर आप लिंक्डइन पे किसी लोगों से कनेक्ट हो जाते हैं और उनको अपने बिजनेस आइडिया के बारे में बताते हैं, बिकॉज द मेन यहाँ पे क्या होता है, फंडिंग एक चीज है, बट अगर आप अपना बिजनेस आइडिया सेल कर सकते हैं, देयर इज अ वे कि आप उसको कन्विंसिंग बना सकते हैं ऑपोजिट पार्टी के लिए, तो इट कैन स्टार्ट एज अ 0 fund idea as well. I wouldn't say zero fund, but yes, थोड़े से funding के साथ आप consulting is one model जो आप use कर सकते हैं definitely in the space of both sustainability and otherwise anyways. So that is one idea. But the larger point is कि आपके कम्युनिटी में या जहां आप रहते हैं वहां क्या क्या चैलेंजेस हैं और किस तरीके से उसको कॉस्ट एफिशिएंटली एड्रेस किया जा सकता है. डेफिनेटली दैट इज द मेन कंसर्न. क्योंकि कोई भी आप बिजनेस शुरू करते हैं, खड़ा करते हैं, पहला सवाल यही होगा कि मैं क्यों आपके बिजनेस में इन्वेस्ट करूं, मैं क्यों सस्टेनेबल बनूं, राइट? एज एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन मैं क्यों सस्टेनेबल बनूं. तो तभी आपका रोल आ जाता है कि हाँ, आप कन्विंस कर पाए उन क्लाइंट को या उन लोगों को कि हाँ, ये सही वे है, प्रोवाइडेड कि आप उस एक्सपर्टीज एरिया में से आते हैं. तो व्हाट इज इंपॉर्टेंट इज नॉट के कौन सा टाइप का बिजनेस मॉडल चलेगा. वन इज ऑफ कोर्स कंसल्टिंग, बट आई वुड से कि शुरुआत में ये बहुत जरूरी है, महत्वपूर्ण है कि आप अपनी एक्सपर्टीज एरिया को लेवरेज करें और एट द सेम टाइम कि जो चैलेंज आपकी कम्युनिटी में है उसको मिला के एक बिजनेस मॉडल बनाएं उसके हिसाब से. क्या ये आपके लिए हेल्पफुल था?
नहीं, बिल्कुल. जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल मैं आपको एक सिंपल बताऊं, जैसे बिजनेस बताया ना, मैं बेसिकली हरिद्वार की हूँ.
जी.
तो उसमें जैसे अभी तक हम सबको पता है कि हम मॉल पे जाते हैं, ऑयल लेके आते हैं और सबको पता है कि उस सब में मिलावट है, राइट? तो अगर हम
जी.
छोटे बिजनेस आइडिया और अच्छे उसमें खुद जो सरसों का तेल है, जैसे पहले कोल्हू चलते थे ना,
जी.
वो है ना कि जैसे उसमें वो
जी.
निकालते थे वो कोल्ड प्रेस ऑयल,
जी.
राइट?
जी.
और अगर हम उसको ऑनलाइन लेते हैं तो वो कितना हमें महंगा पड़ता है, हर चीज़ कोल्ड प्रेस के नाम से. तो अगर अपने अपने शहरों के अंदर कोल्ड प्रेस ऑयल अगर सामने ही वो होता क्या है, जिसको नहीं समझ में है वो समझता नहीं है कि कोल्ड प्रेस ऑयल होता क्या है, वो सिंपल है.
जी.
तो अगर उसको अपने शहर के अंदर ही रह के कहीं दूर जाना भी नहीं पड़ेगा, सिंपल बिजनेस की बात कर रही हूँ, वो एनवायरमेंटल के लिए भी एनवायरनमेंट के लिए भी अच्छा है, लोगों की हेल्थ के लिए भी बहुत अच्छा है कि अगर सामने ही मशीन से उसको निकाल के उसको प्रोवाइड किया जाए. वो
जी,
बहुत
बिल्कुल.
लेस इन्वेस्टमेंट में शुरू हो सकता है और वो शुरू हुआ भी है. और जहाँ अब हमारे शहर के अंदर अगर वो शुरू हुआ है तो उसके घर के आगे लाइन लगती है लेने के लिए उसको दोबारा.
जी.
ऐसे ही आटा चक्की है, अगर हम बात करें, जैसे आजकल सीरियल्स आ रहे हैं, उसके बहुत हम ऑनलाइन मिलता ही नहीं है, वो मिलता ही नहीं है, इतनी ज़्यादा उसको कॉस्टली है. और उसका आटा तो हमें फिर भी ट्रस्ट नहीं होता है कि वो वाकई प्योर मिल रहा है कि नहीं. अगर छोटे लेवल पे वो खोला जाए और उसमें डेफिनेटली लोगों का क्रेज़ है, अपन तो लोगों को पता नहीं है, अगर वो खोल दिया जाए थोड़े टाइम के अंदर उसके दोबारा जैसे चक्कियाँ बंद हो गई थी ना, वो दोबारा खुल गई हैं. अब इसमें हम लोग शर्म करते हैं कि क्या आटा चक्की खोलेंगे, क्या तेल की वो खोलेंगे, परंतु वाकई वो छोटी इन्वेस्टमेंट के अंदर उसमें प्रॉफिट है और वो सबके लिए फायदेमंद है, आई थिंक.
बिल्कुल, 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 बिल्कुल. धन्यवाद. ये बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण पॉइंट आपने बताया. डेफिनेटली एक तो प्रोडक्ट लेड होता है पर सर्विस लेड भी, आई मीन दोनों चीजें. तो जैसे आप कह रहे हैं कोल्ड प्रेस्ड, मेरे घर में मुंबई में घर के पीछे 2 गली पीछे ऐसे ही 1-2 लड़कियां हैं जिन्होंने शुरू किया है कोल्ड प्रेस्ड. वो सामने ही बना के सामने ही दे देती हैं और उनका भी काफी अच्छा चला है बिजनेस. और मुंबई में तो वैसे भी प्राइसेस आप थोड़ा सा ज्यादा भी दे, मतलब लगा सकते हैं प्राइस, पर हाँ, गांव बेस में या फिर कहीं भी जैसे आप छोटे भी शहरों में करेंगे तो भी पोटेंशियल तो बहुत है डेफिनेटली. थैंक यू सो मच. शुक्रिया.
Excuse me, ma'am.
यस.
Sorry for interrupting you. Myself, Muskan Thakur. I have few questions for you, ma'am.
We are actually short on time. Can I just complete the last section, and if we have some time then we can take your question?
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I'll just conclude with the last section. मैम ने बात की कि अगर किसी को बिजनेस शुरू करना है या सस्टेनेबिलिटी कोई सोचता है कुछ अच्छा करना है सोसाइटी के लिए, तो किस तरीके से कर सकता है या कर सकती है. आप सबके केस में कर सकती है since we are talking to a largely women based audience आज. हमारे पास एक कैंपेन है which we started in at Nextmile को जब हमने 1 साल कंप्लीट किया था लास्ट ईयर. और आई थिंक आज Today we are on 20th, right? अगले एक हफ्ते में Nextmile को will officially complete 2 years since the inception. तो 2 साल में almost less than 2 साल में हमने 4,000 lives impact किए हैं. But through the Give Life to Your Idea campaign, basically we have worked with 16 entrepreneurs in India and Nepal to help them start their sustainable business with one-on-one consulting guidance. Essentially, this campaign, this is the link to the campaign. I'll also send it via message later. But ये campaign का flow ऐसा है कि अगर आपके पास कोई business idea है या आप young business कोई चला रहे हैं already, जैसे side business अगर आप शायद इस वक्त चला रहे हैं, तो आप अपनी idea submit कर सकते हैं हमें उस link पे जो मैंने अभी दिखाया था पहले ये वाले link पे. Once you submit the ideas, हर महीने हम 2 ideas shortlist करते हैं. The ideas are shortlisted on the basis of कि क्या उसकी potential है, what is the potential of the idea, कितनी sustainability उसमें embed हो सकती है और क्या-क्या आपके challenges हैं जिसके लिए हम आपको help कर सकते हैं. Nextmile को has partnered with Snowcrest Consulting, which is a financial consulting firm. और जो 2 selected ideas होते हैं हर महीने, we give them 1 hour free consultation from my side at Nextmile Co on how sustainability can be embedded in your business model, and 1 hour free consultation from Snowcrest leadership team on basically financial management. So किस तरीके से आप अपने finances manage कर सकते हैं, and you can proceed with your business idea. So I just wanted to talk about Give Life to Your Idea campaign and then move to the Q&A section quickly. I think there was one question जो आया था. Muskan, if I'm not wrong, आपका नाम?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Hi, ma'am. My question is
Hi.
regarding, ma'am, Microsoft Mini Enterprises. I want to know, ma'am, that there is an initiative started by the government of India regarding this Microsoft Mini Enterprises. So I want to know from you, ma'am, that how this particular thing affect the sustainable development goals and what we are here for about sustainable enterprises, ma'am. Can you please give your idea regarding this?
Yeah, so ऐसे काफी सारे programs हैं जो Government of India जब से Startup India शुरू हुआ है, lot of focus is on ideas or business ideas. I think अभी थोड़ा वक्त है कि sustainable business ideas take some कुछ momentum build होगा उस पे. There is still some more time on that. But I do feel कि technology पे काफी सारी stress है अभी at the moment. ये कुछ सालों से चल रहा है. But I think from a Startup India lens, how technology can play a role in entrepreneurship development, but also in sustainability is very important. So I'll give you an example. Traceability, जब मैंने आपको बताया था about the concept of traceability and palm oil, one technology that is used for traceability and for value chain approach is on blockchain. Blockchain technology जो use होती है, it's little bit technical, but it is a technology that is used to track कि ये product यहाँ से आया था, इस वक्त इस warehouse से निकला है, इस वक्त इस trader के पास पहुंचा है और इस वक्त consumer के साथ touch point हुआ है. तो जो पूरा value chain का journey होती है, वो technology के through track हो सकती है. Any kind of initiative, whether it is Microsoft Mini Enterprises or anything, Startup India, Stand Up India, all these things are more focused on कि business किस तरीके से चला सकते हैं. But as purposeful entrepreneurs, it is our duty to also understand कि कैसे sustainability principles उसमें embed हो सकते हैं. Because क्या होता है कि अगर आप, even if you look at Shark Tank, अब Shark Tank India आया था, almost now second year in the row. A lot of the investment goes to purposeful enterprises. I'll give you an example. There was one man, he developed a device जो आप fan में fit कर सकते हैं, जिससे it is an anti-suicide device. Okay? अभी बहुत सारे engineering colleges में, IITs में, IIMs में, management institutes में, lot of people because of study pressure they commit suicide. So his idea was कि how can we fit these devices कि it can reduce the suicide rate. So that is a social cause he's working towards. But it is a technology. It's a technological device. It's a small chip that has to be fitted in the fan. And it worked very well because they piloted it in one of the jails, because jails mein bhi hota hai bahut baar. They piloted it in 2 management institutes. So that kind of, agar hum usko bhi maddenazar rakheं, तो we will understand कि investor interest भी बहुत आएगा if we ourselves look at the concept of sustainability in some way or some environmental or social good. Was this helpful to answer your question? थोड़ा broad कर दिया मैंने, but yeah.
Hello. Jatin,
Hello.
I just want to ask that the idea that in the last slide that you have given, give life to your idea, means
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. So could you send something more or a detailed material on it where we can work?
Yes, ma'am, sure. I can do that.
Thank you.
हाँ जी, हाँ जी. We basically have it's a very simple Google form. Google form में सब कुछ, I mean, लिखा हुआ होता है. सारे instructions or everything is there. I'll send that. Any other questions?
So
I think time.
I think we are kind of towards the fag end of the thing. So
Sure.
I think there are more questions, but in the interest of time and also respecting your time, so we're going to conclude with some notes and then forward. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Zitin, for this in-depth insight to the field of business sustainability. The fragmentization of the word sustainable into socio-economic environment, which generally doesn't even strike, was beautifully portrayed. The interactive session has really highlighted the concept and interlinkage between sustainable development and entrepreneurship, which in such a simpler way, for which we are grateful to you. Once again, a big thanks for clarifying the doubts of all the participants with such enthusiasm and brilliant examples. Thank you again. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Ravinder Singh, volunteer, Kalgidhar Trust and Akal Connect, to please say a few words.
Thank you. And thank you to the audience for having a very patient listening, and thank you for the amazing session, Zitin. I just, since I have the opportunity and the stage, I'm going to just take 5 minutes to share some of the experience. So, we believe, I believe, and most of us believe here, that the largest sustainable development goal lab which was created, and the most beautiful lab which was created here was conceived in 1906 by Sant Baba Atar Singh Ji here. And that concept was actually implemented by Baba Iqbal Singh Ji in 1986 with 5 students. And now it has grown to an enterprise of 70,000 students all over India. And the way, when you described those 3 circles, I think within this vicinity, all those 3 circles, whether it is the social, which we have about 500 women students on an average who are being picked from the rural area, and they are being supported. And there is a circular economy as well, which is happening, because those 500 students are not only educated and given the residence opportunity, but they are also being deployed in our academies. So that's a beautiful example of how the whole circular economy is working. And whether it's the economic or whether it's the other changes, I think those circles are there. It's a great start that you have done. I think the way you radiate some of the enthusiasm and some of the passion for how the world needs to get impacted, the girls sitting here, and there are many who are not seated in the auditorium, I think there is a lot of semblance of the amount of, जिसको कहते हैं कि तेज़, उनके चेहरे पे जो तेज़ आता है इस जगह में educate होके. I think most of them have that kind of reflection, and I hope they see you as one of the role models who's championing it. and we are picking up a lot of thoughts on that as well. In nutshell, I do want to quickly point out that most of our students sitting here are from nursing college, and there are other colleges also. A big shout out to how our nursing college, how our Akal Charitable Hospital actually impacts the life around. So we are in a deep gratitude in how you deliver selflessly, and you're showing that kind of a part to us. So thank you for that. The last bit is when you draw those 3 circles which had an overlap, I think there has to be a glue which is kind of binding them together. And that glue is the value-based education which is instituted, and those values framework, which is very important to make sure that everyone who's thinking sustainably is always thinking from a values framework. So I almost feel that there has to be an 18th SDG, which is about the values which are supposed to bind all these 3 things together. So thank you, Zitin. We are looking forward for a few more interactions and sharing your time with that. So very thankful to you for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for summarizing the event so well. With this, we come towards the end of our highly enlightening and educative expert talk. I would like to invite Dr. Sushma Sharma, Assistant Professor, Plant Pathology, to please propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Simran. Honorable Vice Chancellor and President Kalgidhar Trust, Dr. Devinder Singh, our invited speaker, Ms. Zitin Munshi, Additional Registrar, Directors of prominent bodies, respected deans, heads, faculty members of Eternal University, and my dear students. It is my honor and privilege to deliver the vote of thanks. Firstly, I am grateful to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Devinder Singh, and President of Kalgidhar Trust for his guidance and immense support. I am extremely grateful for our esteemed invited speaker, Madam Zitin Munshi, for addressing the audience and sparing the valuable time from their busy schedule. I am also thankful to our Dean Research and Chairman, Akal Innovation and Entrepreneurship Cell, Sarbat Da Bhala, Dr. N.P. Singh, for his support and hard work. I would like to appreciate the organizers of this prestigious webinar for their immense hard work. I would like to acknowledge the technical support of IT department for conducting the webinar successfully. Once again, I'm thankful to all the participants for joining this informative webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. To conclude, I would like to quote Kate Lord Brown, to quote, "The end is never the end, it's always the beginning of something new," unquote. I hope you all will have a lot of takeaway from this well-articulated talk. May this be the beginning of your journey towards sustainability and entrepreneurship. Thank you. I request you all to please stand for national anthem.
जनगण अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंग विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उज्ज्वल जलधि तरंग तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You all are requested for tea and refreshments.